So here's a fun question to hear in a strip club. Can I get a refund? And yes, people do occasionally ask for refunds. And yes, it's about as crazy as it sounds. Um, I I'm not a fun dancer to get dances from. I'm going to say that now that I'm retired and I'm never going back to my job. It's like I'm a horrible dancer to get dances from. You either really like my dances or you really hate my dances. And there's one like key defining thing that makes that difference. You either really like my dances because you're getting the dance for entertainment value. So I will be fun to talk to. We will have interesting conversations. I will fold myself into a pretzel for you. You'll see me do contortions that you never saw an exotic dancer do before, or it's very unlikely you've never seen an exotic dancer do before. And I would do all that stuff, and people liked it. And some people loved my dances because they would buy them. And I didn't sell like big dances, I'd sell like little single song sets and things. And they'd get these dances, and I'd fold myself up into a pretzel, and I'd tell them a funny story or two, and I'd make them laugh, and then they'd leave, and they would be happy. And I loved giving those kinds of dances to people because it was entertainment. That was my job. My job was to be entertaining. And when I succeeded and when the people I sold my dances to were entertained, it was fantastic. And then there are the other kind of people that I gave dances to, and those were the kinds of guys who asked for refunds. And those were the kinds of guys who would buy the dance with the expectation that there would be a certain degree of friction in the groin area when they got their dance. That's not my job. And I'm not saying, oh, that's not my job because I'm just too lazy to do it. Like, oh, well, that's not my job description, so I'm not actually going to do that part. I mean, that is really, really, really not my job as an exotic dancer. Back when I was dancing, my job was to be entertaining, and I tried to be entertaining. My job was to dance, and I tried to dance as well as I possibly could. I learned how to do contortions so that I could do better dancing. Um, at no point in any of that was genitalia rubbing part of my job. I spent a lot of time working in clubs where it was illegal to do that sort of activity. You weren't supposed to be touching the customers at all, and you definitely weren't supposed to be touching their nether regions. But even in clubs where it was a little bit more, like I worked on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, you can do a lot of touching on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. But it still was not my job to create any kind of friction in the groin area for my customers on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And I remember there was one guy I sold a dance to, and he was quite intoxicated. He bought a 3 song set from me. And at the club that I was working at, you go up a set of stairs and to this lovely, lovely couch on the balcony where they have, their 3 song sets. And so I think it was like $90. It was like a $90 set of dances he bought. We went up there, and there was a girl up there with a guy who she was dancing for. I didn't know at the time that she had no business up there and she wasn't supposed to be up there, but there she was. And so we couldn't sit on the nice fancy couch in the 3 dance room area on the balcony. So I found a little chair that was, kind of near the edge of the balcony, but it was a chair and it was the only place you could sit down. And so he sat down there and I started doing my dance. And he starts pulling on my hips to try and push my hips down up against him. And I started working very hard and engaging quite a lot of muscles like in my legs just to avoid any kind of contact. And so he's pulling me down as hard as he can, and I'm pushing myself away as hard as I can. And he's basically bouncing me up and down on his lap in this attempt to get me, you know, up against his genitalia. Which, I mean, we're conveniently covered by a pair of jeans, but that's still closer than I want to go. And so he's bouncing me up and down on his lap, and I'm pushing away from him, and our songs are going by, and this is like torture. My thighs were rubbed raw from just trying to get away from this guy, like to keep that couple inches of distance that I always maintain, no matter what. And at some point, the manager comes running up the stairs and she looks at me and she's like, "What on earth are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm giving him my dances. I'm bouncing up and down on this guy's lap, trying not to encounter, Big Willie hiding under his jeans there." And she just, she's like, "Everybody downstairs is starting to stare." And I realized that only the tops of our heads were visible above the balcony railing. So from the balcony like from the first floor looking up at the balcony, it looked like this guy was, I mean, doing some very explicit activities with me because I'm just bouncing up and down on his lap, and so all they're seeing is him looking kind of drunk with his head lolling back, and me like bouncing up and down like madly in his lap. What they didn't realize is that I was working so hard to avoid contact with his crotch that it looked like I was doing, well, I mean, it looked like we were doing some pretty intimate stuff there. So then she goes over to the other dancer on the couch that we were supposed to be sitting on, scolds this girl for being there because she had no business there, sends her on her way downstairs along with her customer. We go over to the couch and sit down. And then for the rest of our 3-song set, this guy continues bouncing me up and down on his lap. And my skin is like getting just increasingly chafed, and it's like I could complain and I could tell him no, but I'm hoping that maybe he'll buy some more dances, and so I'm just trying very hard to like push myself away from him as hard as possible, and he's not pulling on me so hard that I can't do that. But it was a workout. I earned my money on that one. It was hard, and he never did buy another dance, which was really disappointing. But yeah, I don't do crotch contact, and I mean, a lot of girls do. A lot of women in strip clubs will. It's not it's not smiled upon by the law in many places that I've worked. I remember there was one club I worked at where you weren't actually supposed to touch the men's groins. Like, we were told that when I got hired. It was like, what are the rules? Okay, rules are don't touch their groins. Technically you can straddle them, but no longer than 3 seconds. That 3 second rule was probably not real. That was probably a bending of the rules or a bending of the interpretation of the law. Like, oh, you can kind of pretend that you're moving across their lap and you could straddle them for like 3 seconds and then get off. Like, I don't know. And I should probably say, since we are talking about the material we're talking about, when I say get off, I mean get off of his lap, not anything else you might think. So, I was giving legal dances in that club. I mean, I was giving very risque dances. They were very fun, and they were very, they were risque. I remember that club very fondly. It was a good club. There was this one guy, he was Russian. He didn't speak like a word of English, but all he wanted from me was to rub the tip of my nose against the tip of his nose. So I literally spent a full, I think it was a half hour dance. It was either a half hour or 15 minutes, and I think it was a half hour, rubbing the tip of my nose against the tip of his nose. And I thought I was going to die of boredom. And by the time his dance was over, like, he was thrilled to be with me. Like, he would have bought dances for me all night. And I was like, I'm so bored and the tip of my nose is getting sore. I have to get out of here. Thank you for your dance. Goodbye. But yeah, I mean, it was a good club and the customers were usually pretty nice, but I remember there were a few times that I would go down to the bathroom because every once in a while I had to go to the bathroom. And there were a couple times that my friends would be there and they would be washing off their little sequined outfits, and it would be like, what happened? Oh, this guy came all over me. And now it seeped through my clothes, and now my clothes have some total stranger's semen all over them. Yeah, I never had that problem. Ever. So yeah, there were a lot of guys who did not like my dances. There were a lot of people who got my dances who didn't like my dances because they weren't getting off during my dances. And a lot of those guys asked for refunds. And it's not necessarily a good thing when guys ask for a refund at a club. Like, I'm always a little bit leery when they do that because it's like, if enough guys start asking for refunds from you, the managers are going to kind of look at you like, okay, what are you doing wrong here? But when the occasional guy asks for a refund because you wouldn't give him the friction he so desires, they just kind of laugh at it. It's like, yeah, that guy wanted... And I mean, I've had guys... Sometimes you sell a dance to a guy, and I remember there was one club I was at. They had curtains closing the dance booths, and I sold a dance to a guy. We went into the back room. He sat down. I turned around. I closed the curtain. I turned around to face him, and he had already unzipped his pants and whipped out Little Willie. And I'm like, no, sir, you have to put that away. And, I mean, maybe it's just the fact that I worked in medical care as long as I did. My response to that is, sir, you have to put that away. I knew one girl, she had a guy do that to her, and she flipped out like she just freaked out, like she didn't know what to do, and so she just panicked and screamed at the top of her voice in a very, very strong Southern accent, very thick Southern accent. Lovely, lovely girl. Eek! It's a penis! And she turned around and ran out of the dance booth, which I might have told that story before, but it's just so awesome that she did that. Like she was an awesome dancer. And it was such a genuine response and such an appropriate response given the fact that this guy was whipping out his genitals and surprising her with them. That's not actually the way that you want to surprise a dancer. Like, we don't actually appreciate that kind of surprise. So, yeah, I guess he was so ashamed and embarrassed that he slunk out of the dance booth and did not bother her again, which, good, good. Hopefully he learned his lesson. I mean, after all the other kinds of work that I've done, which have been very non-sexual in their nature and much more socially appropriate, I see some guy pulling his pants down. It's like, sir, you have to put that away. I've had to, sir, you have to put that away a couple times. Not as many as you would probably think. In an 8-year period, it's not that frequent of an occurrence, but it does happen. Um, so yeah, there are guys who have all sorts of weird ideas about what you're gonna do to them in the private dance booths, and if you don't do to them what they expect you to do to them, some of them will ask for refunds. I had one guy, I was in a very weird mood. I actually gave him the refund. I remember I sold him the dance. It was like a cheap dance, like a $15 dance. It was like the cheapest dance I could possibly sell to anyone. And I gave him this dance, and I'm halfway through the dance, and he's like, I want a refund. You're not touching, And he demanded to see the manager because I told him there were no refunds. And so I was like, okay, I'll go get you the manager. So I went and walked to the manager, and before I could say 2 words to the manager, he blows past me and starts angrily telling the manager that I cheated him and that he needs his money back and that what kind of establishment are you running here, blah, blah, blah. And the manager just kind of looks at me like he's seen this before a million times, and he just kind of goes, you can give him a refund if you want. And I looked at it, was like, it's $15. I'm not really in the mood to deal with this guy here. Have your $15. He took the money and he shook it in my face like I was a dog and snarls at me. This is not about money. And it's like, I didn't have to give you that money back. Like, thank you for guaranteeing that I will never, ever give any man a refund ever again, because it's clearly not worth it. You know, men, when they're, like, a lot of women out there think that men are dogs. Like, a lot of girls, especially dancers, they just think men are dogs, men are crap. I've seen a lot of women who have very negative views about men. Men are awesome. I have a lot of fun with men. I get along well with men. That's one of the reasons I love dancing. I spent pretty much my whole day talking with men. It was really fun. But men have, like, 2 different modes when they're bonding with women, or, having any kind of sexual exchange with women. They do have women that they want to be with, that they invest time and energy in courting, and those are more long-term investments. Those are wives, those are girlfriends, those are fiancés. They have those women in their lives that they do put a lot of energy into courting and pleasing and, basically building up a relationship with. But when a man is seeking out immediate and temporary sexual satisfaction, he's not exactly being his best self. And so when guys come into the strip club, and I think people think that all guys who come into the strip club are like this, and they're really not, but when a guy comes into the strip club and all he wants to do is sexually satisfy himself on one of the dancers, he's not going to regard us as particularly human. He generally dehumanizes us significantly, and so then they treat you like crap, and they also want you to do stuff for them that you're not going to want to do for them. It seems like the guys who are rudest are also the ones who are demanding the most stuff, particularly illegal stuff, blowjobs, hand jobs, things that we don't do. Um, and you might, as an outsider to the strip club industry, look at that and say, well, that seems pretty dehumanizing, and it seems like you've picked out a job for yourself that seems, very dehumanizing. And first of all, not every guy that I danced for was like that. I had a lot of fun with a lot of awesome guys in strip clubs. Second of all, guys who are like that, who are in that mindset of I just want to satisfy myself sexually on you like you're a piece of meat, they're going to be in that mindset whether you're in a strip club or not. I remember before I got a job in the strip club, I had classes in college where guys would, they just kind of zoom in on me, but like, yep, I want to bone you. That's all I care about. And they just, have that very narrow tunnel vision going on. I'd have guys contact me on social media like, hey, you're hot, wanna fuck. I'd have guys, at my job, hanging out after hours when they weren't supposed to, well into my shift, basically just telling me again and again that they want to have sex with me. Like, that was my life. I mean, I want you all to remember that I was, 10 years younger and a hell of a lot hotter back then, but that was my life. Like, men were going to demand sexual things from me that I was not willing to give them inside of a strip club, outside of a strip club. No matter how proper or proprietary I acted, no matter how very conservatively I dressed, it didn't really matter. They didn't care. If a guy is in that mindset where all he wants to do is hump you like a dog, that's really what he's going to be focused on, and that's how he's going to act, like a dog. And so one of the things I noticed when I first started dancing was how very nice it was when I met those guys that I could demand money from them for having to put up with their bullshit. It was actually a really pleasant thing. Like, okay, you're another one of those guys who doesn't see me as human, basically thinks I'm a piece of meat, and is trying in any way that you possibly can to get your genitalia up inside of me. Pay me. Pay me for my time. Pay me for the irritation. Pay me, and I'll put up with your shit. It was so liberating. It was so cool. It was awesome. I loved it. Which is, and again, like, as an outsider, you're probably looking and saying, so you took this dehumanizing job where people are much more likely to do that sort of thing with you. It's like, when I was in my early 20s, people were going to do that sort of thing to me either way. And so much less annoying when you're looking at the cash piling up in your wallet or in your hand and saying, this is good. This is good. I can tolerate you so much more easily when I know that you're just paying me for the service of my ears, so I can listen to your, rambling. So that was actually one of the nicer things about the job. That was one of the perks. Like, there were a lot of things about the job that I never knew until I got into the job. That was one of the perks. Having guys demanding a refund and being all angry at me, not so much of a perk. I would very much rather make people happy than make them angry. And a lot of people did get dances from me who were very happy with their dances. And a lot of people got dances from me who were very unhappy with their dances. And they demanded refunds. And they didn't get their refunds most of the time. That one guy did, and there was another guy. And I don't know if I got a little bit of time. I can probably tell that story. So I was working at this one club, and it was a very, very dark club. It was painted black, the entire club, and it was lit in neon purple lighting. It was a lovely, moody place. It was very cool. It was a very, very well-run club. I really liked it there. I stayed there for as long as I could. That was actually the club I retired from because it was a good club. It was probably my favorite. And there was a guy who came in on a really slow night, and this was when I was pregnant with my daughter, so I was not earning as much as I usually did, and it was a slow night, and this guy comes in, and he asked me for a dance, and I was like, oh, thank God, good, yes, I would love to dance for you. He's like, okay, he hands me the money, he's like, wait a minute, I gotta go to the bathroom first. I was like, okay. I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And eventually he comes back out from the bathroom, and it's like, okay, are you ready for your dance? No, I don't like this song, I want to wait for the next one. I'm like, By the time we get into the dance booth, the next song will have started already. Yeah, well, I want to wait to the next song. I gotta do a thing. And he's hanging out, and I think he ordered a drink, and he's hanging out, and no, I'm not ready for the dance yet. And that puts me in a very uncomfortable position because I have his money. He paid me for a service, and I have to give him that service. That's my job. And so it's like, you're making me sit around and wait when I could be making sales to other customers or even just going off and, going to the bathroom and checking my makeup. Or, since I never really wore makeup all that often, putting on makeup because I'm so bored because there aren't that many customers. I could be doing other things right now, and instead I'm just sitting around waiting for you. Anyway, eventually I convinced him to go into the back room because it's like, look, I can't keep waiting like this, and you keep passing up songs. You're gonna have to accept that whatever song is next is gonna be your song, or that's it. He goes into the bathroom, or into the back room, not the bathroom. He goes into the back room. He sits down. The next song starts. I start dancing for him. And he immediately says, "You're going to grind on my dick, right?" Now, this guy's had me waiting for, a while on this dance. And I looked at it and I was like, "No, I'm not going to be doing that." He's like, "Well, I want my money back." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "No, no, that's it. This is awful. Your dance is over. You're done." And I'm getting my clothes back on because you can't walk out onto the floor without a certain number of clothes on. So you can strip into your underwear for a private dance, like a bikini, but you can't necessarily walk around the floor in a bikini. You have to have a dress on. So I was getting my dress on, and I was getting my boots on, and this guy he's like, "Well, well, the black girls do it." And I was like, who cares what the black girls do? That's not my business. It's illegal. I'm not going to grind on your dick. That's it. You may leave, sir. And he's just sitting there and he won't leave. And he's like, "Well, the black girls the black girls do it. So why don't you do it?" "I want you to do it because the black girls do it." And I was like, "Well, that's not my job. And they're not supposed to be doing it. So out, get out, leave." And he keeps sitting there. He doesn't leave the booth. And I'm still struggling back into my clothes. Um, and he just keeps on saying, "Well, you should be grinding on my dick. The black girls do it. The black girls do it." Keeps on talking about black girls, like, pretty obsessively. I'm like, you know. Finally, I just looked at it. I was like, "Look, any girl that does that is a whore. I am not going to do that for you because I am not a whore." And I mean, I was pregnant. I was hormonal. I was a little bit irate by this point because he had wasted way more time than I would have gotten money for out of, like, it was just not a good situation. And so he's like, "Well, yeah, but I want you to do it. Why aren't you doing it? You should be rubbing on my dick." He keeps on going on. He's not leaving. I'm getting increasingly annoyed. He's being very rude to me. And finally, I snapped. I was like, I took out his $15, which he'd paid in ones, or not $15, $25. He'd paid me in ones. I threw it in his face and shouted at him to get out of the booth. And he didn't leave. And finally, I got my clothes on. I got up. I stormed out of the booth. One of the bouncers is there. He's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "That guy will not leave. He wanted me to rub on his dick. He demanded a refund. I'm so done. I am so over this. This is not a good day." The bouncer had to go into the booth and escort the man out of the club. Later on, we both find out that the guy was sitting at the front of the club complaining to other bouncers, like the guys who guard the doors, and I guess the girl who guards the doors too, that I was being racially discriminatory against him. I haven't mentioned what color he was because I couldn't tell what color he was. It was a very, very dark club. It was not exactly it wasn't exactly blacklit, so you couldn't see, like, people's eyeballs and their teeth glowing in the dark, but it was blacklit enough and, like, darkly lit enough that you really couldn't tell skin tone very well. He could have been Asian. He could have been Mexican. He could have been Hawaiian. He could have been he could have been black. He could have been anything. So I wasn't paying attention. I assumed he was just really kind of tan. Like, he was a white dude. He was kind of tan. Who cares? I wasn't paying attention to his ethnicity. I was just trying to sell him a dance, and I thought he was being very rude to me. Um, he was black, it turns out. And that's the reason he kept on mentioning the black girls. Like, apparently, this guy in this particular city would travel around from club to club, and he would bait people who were white into saying racist things in front of him, and then he would cry racial discrimination. And he had like multiple lawsuits going on with multiple clubs. And he had tried to do that with me. And so when he's constantly, failing to get me to call him any racially discriminatory names, which is probably, well, I mean, I wouldn't do that under normal circumstances, but it probably didn't hurt that I couldn't tell what color he was. But I wouldn't do that normally. Like, I just don't notice these things, which I know is an issue apart from, as a separate issue, but I couldn't tell. And I don't use racial slurs to begin with. Like, that's just not my cup of tea. But failing to get me to use a racial slur against him, he started bringing up the black girls who worked in the clubs and trying to use that to get me to say something racially derogatory about them. And I did call them whores, but at the time, what I was saying is any girl who does this is a whore. I didn't honestly believe that all of the black girls in that club were doing the things that he was demanding that I do in his private dance, but any girl who does some of these things is a prostitute under the law in that city. That's prostitution. That's the definition of prostitution in the law in that city. So, yeah, he was being really really rude to me because he was trying to get a big fat juicy paycheck from suing the club for racial discrimination. I had no idea he was black. I still honestly didn't think he looked very black to me. I talked to the bouncer, and he didn't know the guy was black either. And so the two of us are sitting there and having this very awkward conversation with each other, like, "Did you know he was black?" "No, no, I didn't know he was black. Did you know he was black?" "No, I mean, I thought maybe, he was kind of tan. Like, if I had to guess, maybe Mexican-ish. He was tan, it was a dark club. You really, really couldn't tell. Like, you could tell if someone was really, really, really dark skinned or really, 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 really pale. You could tell then. You weren't going to have a very easy time telling apart from that. Like, the only thing that was particularly well lit was the stage, and even then, they used those lights to obscure a lot of flaws. So that was funny. He technically got a refund. I think the bouncers were ready to demand that he pay me back the money I threw in his face because I had started dancing for him, but I just looked at it and was like, just get him away from me. He's so nasty. Just get him away from me. So those are really the only two times that I think I've ever given a man a refund. I've had countless men demand refunds from me, which would make you think that I'm not a very good dancer. And maybe you do think I'm not a very good dancer. Maybe you think the definition of a good lap dance is that friction. That's not our job. And so I never did that. And I have no regrets. I'm sure many people regret buying dances from me, but I'm sure also that there were many people who did enjoy dances from me. I wasn't ever a very sensual dancer or a very sexual dancer. That wasn't who I was. A lot of the guys I talked to in the club would say that I was the kind of gal that they would love to go out and have a beer with at a bar. That was my thing. Like, everybody's got a different angle they're selling as a dancer. Some girls are extremely sensual. Some girls can talk really, really dirty. Some girls have like deep sensual voices and they tell you all sorts of dirty little things and whisper them in your ear and blow across your cheek and make you kind of shudder inside. I'm not one of those girls. I'm, pretty happy, bouncy, and I'm fun. I'm not more than that. And I don't try to be more than that. I never tried to be more than that. And honestly, that's probably one of the reasons that I've been able to walk away from dancing relatively gracefully. It still really hurts not to be able to go back to the strip club and just get a good workout in, but the thing I miss is the workouts. I didn't have a lot of my own personal sense of sexuality tied in to exotic dance. And I think that might actually have something to do. I mean, there was a certain degree, like when you are like just rock solid muscle all over and you look good, that's going to affect your own personal perceived sexual appeal, and that's gone because I'm not getting the regular workouts that I used to, and so I feel kind of flabby and I feel kind of but my sense of sexuality was not tied into having that particular profession. So it was really, I guess I'm really lucky because I was able to walk away and do so without much difficulty. I really really miss my job. I do. But I've never been one of those women who's like had to go back to work because I just don't feel like I'm going to be like I'm sexy anymore. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's unrelated. I'll talk to you guys later. Criticize dancers and fitness models and a lot of people like that for that matter. They're like, oh, well, she just hasn't had a cheeseburger in forever. She doesn't know how to eat food. It's like, if you criticize a dancer by telling her she doesn't know how to eat food, hello there.